So good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for the Accountability Talks series with the National Business Initiative. The point of these talks is ideally to try and engage with senior leadership about issues of accountability, get from leading industry experts as to how they go about it, because it is actually quite a very, very important topic. And I think these conversations and the way that we want to drive them is about their experiences and what they're doing in their respective organizations. But I'm not sitting alone today. I've got with me Joanne Yawich, who's the CEO of the NBI. Joanne, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We've also got Professor Wiseman Kutu, the chairperson of KPMG. Ntate, good afternoon. As well as the CEO, Ignatius Sohole. Thank you so much for joining us, Ntate.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Joanne, I think before we get into it, it's important that we get an understanding of the work that you do as the NBI and what the purpose of these accountability talks are.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, and afternoon, everybody. The NBI is a business organization with a company-based membership, and we have been going since 1994. Mm-hmm. The origins of the NBI and its purpose go back to a commitment by business to engage with society and to support the process of building a democratic country by walking the talk. And for 27 years, what we've tried to do as the NBI is to support our members in relation to their socio-economic and environmental and ethics programs in order that it is easier for business to engage with society, and in order that the way business engages with society is really a demonstration of practice of a partnership across the country. So critical to that is the issue of how companies function internally. We have to walk our talk, and that walking the talk internally is as important in building trust across society as it is in walking the talk externally. And so that issues of looking at questions of transformation within the workplace, the extent to which ethics and accountability is embedded in the way that leadership operates and in the kinds of cultures that leaders build in organizations are fundamentally important in South Africa, not only to create a much more functional workplace, but also in terms of the way that business goes out into the rest of society. And I think that in relation to today's conversation, we've come through a very difficult period in South African society, in particular a long period of state capture, and accompanying a long period of state capture, I think a culture of fear and a culture of not compliance, but a culture of trying to go along with the prevailing culture in society, and that has proved to have had very damaging effects not only on society broadly, but also on business. And so the question then of what do we need to do within the corporate environment in order to deeply embed a culture of integrity and a culture of accountability, and what are the lessons that we've learned in the last number of years about what can go wrong, and then what do we need to do in order to ensure that that is redressed and doesn't happen again. So very grateful to the CEO and to Professor Nkuhlu for being here today.
Well, it is certainly a bold stance. I mean, there's, when you put yourself out there, especially in front of media as well as the public, to say that this is who we are, this is what has happened, but this is what you're going to do going forward. Prof. Nkuhlu, I think the most important thing, almost being, especially being chairman, you've got that sort of oversight and almost like a helicopter view of what happens to give guidance, especially within the organization. I think the most important thing is that, especially when we're speaking about issues of accountability, ethical leadership, it would be important to maybe try and get an understanding of where did it all begin? When was that sort of turning point to say that we've got to do things a little bit differently? I mean, as Joanne has said, we come from a period where you almost had to go along with whatever has happened because, all of us were sort of like being led by the blind in some way.
No, thank you very much. Yes, we've had a very challenging and interesting times since joining KPMG. I was invited to join KPMG as chairman of the board in 2018.
Yes.
That was the time when state capture and corruption was at the peak.
Yes.
As you are aware, in 2016, Advocate Thuli Madonsela had come up with the idea of a commission of inquiry into state capture. And organizations like Business Leadership South Africa were really had taken a very strong stand against corruption. So it was in that context that KPMG got embroiled in this state capture scenario. What had happened is that they were conducting their business in the same way as other businesses and establishing relationship with clients. And when they have established those relationships, make sure that they are sustained over an extended period of time and really focus on giving the client the best service they could. Businesses tend to put commercial success on top of everything else. When there are issues about ethical conduct and so on, sometimes those kind of issues don't feature prominently in executive meetings, in leadership meetings. So when you have got a partner or a senior manager who's maintaining that relationship, he is inclined to say, what I'm expected by the leadership to produce is more revenue. And I will not risk losing a client who's paying just because there's noise out there by the media. And he tries to stick there. That's where now the tone from the top by the chief executive and the board becomes important. When that noise is there and your partners or senior managers tend to say what you are expected to produce is revenue increases, is profit increases, it's the chief executive and the board that should stand back and say, what is this? We are a corporate citizen and society expects us to behave in a certain way. And we cannot allow a situation to arise where our name and our work is associated with things that are harmful to the country or are seen by them to be unethical. And it's that duty of that leadership. So really, my reading then was that there was that situation at KPMG. This focus on commercial success tended to eclipse this concern about your reputation and your duty to be accountable not only to your clients and employees, but to bigger society.
As the CEO, and as Prof. Nkutlu is explaining, that gives you an opportunity to almost like take a step back and steer the organization in a different way. However, people on the ground are the ones that obviously are the ones getting their hands dirty, because it's all well and good from that sort of operational point of view to be able to take a step back and say, let's not do this. Yet on the ground it's a totally different story, because we know the issues of what happens, especially internally in government, where there's this sort of cold drink culture that happens. And as Prof is saying, do you then now stop the work from happening? Do you stop people from getting paid? Do you cancel contracts? Or do you just carry on that culture? How do you get to a point where your message, your sort of ethical leadership needs to filter all the way right down to the very person that walks into those buildings?
To actually get it to penetrate through the organization, one, it's a hard job, and it's not something that you'd say in 12 months, done,
Yes.
sorted. It's continuous. You have new people joining the organization continuously. They need to be inducted into the culture of the organization. Therefore, whenever leadership engages with teams and staff at KPMG, all the time you need to be hammering this. But not only that, if there's a behavior that is different from what you're expecting, you need to deal with it effectively.
Yes.
Because if you don't, then it means you're playing just lip service. So, when unfortunately, there's no something like a thermometer that you can dip into KPMG. So, okay, now the culture is embedded.
Yes.
But there's little things that you look at that happen that you pick up as your anecdotal evidence as to how the culture is moving.
The partners themselves, from time to time, they would bring prospective clients to head of risk. And the head of risk depending on the size of the client, especially if it's a big client, that is likely to account for a substantial fee, they would come to us. It has been wonderful for me as chairman to sit at that board. And when we are dealing with a client who's paying, who has capacity to increase our fees, but he has got pending cases of corruption, of bribery against his company, and we say, yes, we understand the money, but this is not KPMG. We are not going to be, we're not increasing the client, and we turn down that relationship. So we've said that too. But the beauty of it is that when I sit as the chairman of the board now, when clients like that, prospective clients, are brought to the board, it's not me who speaks. It's partners of KPMG. They would deliberate these things. I say, I have nothing to add. They understand the values, they live them. They would actually not accept a client, even if it's a big client, if the ethics are not right. And really, we're very proud of that. So at that level, that courage is being demonstrated at a high level and is becoming really embedded. But I'm certain that Ignatius, they deal with these things on a daily basis.
So we've walked a long journey with KPMG in the sense that I think that KPMG dealt with the issue of state capture very differently to many of the other organizations that were named, I suppose named and shamed actually at that point in time. In particular, because KPMG started at a very early stage, quite a robust set of interactions with its stakeholders. So I participated in some very difficult, I think difficult for KPMG, sessions that brought together a whole range of civil society organizations, anti-corruption organizations, organizations working in the space across society to really talk about what had happened. And to, I mean, in my experience, it gave, I suppose, a platform for those organizations to talk about what their problems were, but also gave KPMG an opportunity both to hear that, but then to also be able to reflect. And so I think for the NBI in forming this partnership, it was that ability, even at that early stage in the process of KPMG, to say, we know that there's a problem. We need to engage with our key stakeholders in order to understand what this has meant for them and what it means for us. And we are then going to go back and say what needs to happen. So for us as NBI, I think that made it, in a sense, a no-brainer that this is an organization that is capable of looking at itself. And I think that, you know, many things go wrong in many organizations. It is the ability at a leadership level, I think, to be able to say things went wrong, we can acknowledge them, and we can put in place what is necessary in order to change. That makes the difference. So I think that the partnership has really been founded on that. And some of the work that we've partnered on is developing, for example, training programs for corporates around ethics and integrity, so that you don't only look at anti-corruption as something that is a tick box or a compliance or a regulatory related issue, but it really is about your own thinking process.